Hello, Alexa developers, and welcome to session 1 of Alexa Games Week. We just had session 0 where we played Starfinder, and now we're here to talk with Ezra Kim and Chris Morrow about Starfinder. So, yeah, I'll let you introduce yourselves.
Okay, I'm Chris Morrow. I'm a senior producer / product manager with Alexa Games.
Oh, Ezra, you are muted.
I think you're muted.
I'm here. Okay. Hi, I'm Ezra, and I worked on Skill Flow Builder, the tool that's out there for developing skills, and also a developer in Amazon with Alexa Skills and Games Focus.
So, the world has seen Greg and I's opinions on Starfinder, but I think it would mean a lot more to talk to some experts in the voice game industry with you two. So,
oh wow, expert!
It's a heavy burden.
Experts and inventor of Skill Flow Builder.
I'll take it.
So, with that, let's go and get on over to the presentation that you've prepared for us. Alexa, play Starfinder.
It's dangerous to
quick
get
audio
lost
clip here.
down here. You're about to find out how dangerous.
Starfinder. Starfinder is a science fantasy role-playing game that puts you in the role of a bold outer space adventurer.
Looks like these wires lead to an explosive of some kind.
Exploring the mysteries of a weird and magical universe.
You're here to steal our score! We gotta get out of here!
Was I supposed to stop that goblin, or...?
Through the decisions you make, your character will grow in wealth and skill.
Good work. I can tell you've got what it takes to work with the Starfinders.
Or meet a grisly end.
Cut the yellow wire.
Look out!
Right? Nice. Yeah, it's we found we were having a tough time conveying to people just kind of right off the bat, like, okay, well, what's the play experience like? And that's kind of what drove that little 60-second trailer. Was we found that it was much easier just to have people listen to it, and then they kind of like, oh, okay, yeah, I got it, I understand.
So, we've had the introduction from both of you.
Yep.
So let's get into it.
So this was that was Ezra and I 10 years ago. Just FYI. Just kidding. Just kidding. Okay, so yeah, so we're gonna talk a little bit about Starfinder. We'll be going back and forth with the audience, so feel free to drop a question in as you think it's applicable. I don't think we got to talk to this crowd as much about why voice is kind of a cool gaming paradigm. I mean, it's early stage gaming, so right now it feels like you could just have an idea, use something like Skill Flow Builder. That's what we use, to just put together a quick game loop, start to test it, and it's really neat to be able to just iterate so quickly, and kind of invent things, as opposed to picking up a sort of a template and kind of already knowing the inputs and outputs. Another thing that I've really found enjoyable is that being able to extend gaming into a kind of a use case or a couple places where gaming isn't available. And with Starfinder, players are, in the reviews, they're posting that they really enjoy playing it in the car or playing it in the kitchen. That's really good for the commute back when the world was commuting. Now I commute downstairs, but that's neither here nor there.
There was some Twitch chat from the last session talking about how it seems like a great game for the car.
Yeah, we see a lot of people, either using, the Alexa app through Bluetooth, or they're using the Alexa Auto, or some of the integrations with like CarPlay, or some of the other OEM manufacturers. And it is, yeah, it's a great, 30 to 40 minutes with the pilot episode. It's a great, 30 to 40 minutes to just, replace your podcast or your audiobook with something that's got a little bit more agency. Yeah, I guess. Okay, so next.
Yep. The project, a natural 20. What does that mean?
Yeah, so for anybody who is familiar with tabletop gaming, you've got D20s. That's a 20-sided die, and a natural 20. If you roll it, you succeed no matter what. So it's so for us, this was just a very natural fit because we're tabletop RPG fans. It was a very what's the right word? It was a very challenging experience to take what is a multiplayer analog experience around the table and turn that into a single player adventure. And it's what elements of the multiplayer experience need to show through for it to be authentic. And then also just, the excitement of doing something new, kind of the interactive audio adventure or voice RPG, depending on how you look at it. Yeah, that's just really fun to kind of iterate in that space. We've got a little bit about Starfinder, the brand. So in the off chance that folks haven't seen it, so Paizo Inc. Used to be the publishing company for Wizards of the Coast, and then they went independent, and they are now they own Pathfinder and Starfinder, and their business is they create just physical content, they create some digital content, and then they license IP for digital adaptation, which is sort of how the Starfinder project got underway. And then the game itself, this is, look at how much fun those people are having.
I recognize at least one of the faces there.
Is that me? When did you grab this picture?
No, don't worry about it. All permissions were secured. Any relation to people real is a complete coincidence. So this was the team. We were, kind of getting the feel of what the tabletop experience was, just to make sure that we could kind of bring that in. But what you see is on the, I guess it'd be the right of your screen, that's the Starfinder Beginner's Box, which is it's a simplified rule set. It's designed to get a party of 2 to 4 people into the game as quickly as possible. And then there's Paizo publishes these modules called Adventure Paths. So they're like 40 pages. It's a kind of a quick start adventure. And this particular one, Dead Sons Incident at Absalom Station, was one of their best sellers. And so as we were looking at, okay, what are the mechanics of the game? We looked to the Beginner's Box for the rule set. And then in terms of what should the narrative be, we looked to Dead Sons Incident at Absalom Station for the adaptation. Which takes us to, okay, so what were the goals? What are the goals? So, one of the goals is to expand the Starfinder audience to single players. Typically, in the tabletop space, the game master or the dungeon master is the person who buys most of the content and shares it with the group. And so there was some interest in looking at what are other business models. We were looking at high autonomy players interested in RPGs and what would be the intersection of, high autonomy and audio only. What would that look like? And then we also looked at this, I talked about it earlier, but bringing an authentic RPG experience to people without access. And in this, access it has a broad range of meanings. As on the one hand, we've gotten some feedback from people who are disabled, visually challenged, visually impaired, and being able to engage with the Starfinder universe and a tabletop RPG in a way that they really enjoy, all the way through, folks who may not have a group in their area or they can't find a regular group to play with. That this really helps them, or that they really enjoy kind of scratching the RPG itch. So those were kind of the three goals.
Oh wow!
And then today, yeah, it's really neat. And so then, I guess, do we have any questions so far? I'll take a pause here before.
Yeah, everyone, feel free to ask your questions in chat. We'll, ask them over to Chris and Ezra.
I did notice early on, somebody was asking, Oxygen Box was asking if there was a good walkthrough or tutorial on getting started with SFB. There is a public document, and we also have a chat, I believe, Joe, isn't that right, on Thursday?
Yes, there's going to be a Twitch stream then. Let me go and link to you the initial documentation.
Yeah, do come by, because I think we're going to talk about in details on more like application level of how Skillful Builder was used for Starfinder. So that would be a good lesson.
Wait, there is also a question here about the daily active user, monthly active user ratio, and 2-week retention.
What a great question.
It is a great question.
The daily active users is beep, 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 beep. And then the weekly active users is beep, beep, beep. Did you get that? Everybody get that? Sorry, a little tongue in cheek there. But so we aren't able to discuss specific numbers. And that's basically it.
And then Gohaku asks, can this technology be adapted to Magic the Gathering? It can indeed, and I can actually open source some code for you. I have a skill of my own which recognizes Magic cards. So we could talk another time about that. Feel free to ping me.
That's pretty cool.
Yeah, I get pretty jazzed thinking about all of the, if you abstract from the specific brand and think about what this theoretically unlocks.
Yeah.
Man, there's so much content that I want to engage with kind of in this, in this way.
And I gotta say, this third bullet point here, bring the RPG experience to players without access, like, you've really done a great job of capturing that tabletop experience. And Greg commented on this last time it feels like you're playing with a really good DM, right? The kind of DM that has all the sound files available, the different chattering of goblins, the background of a tavern, all of that. I even heard that bus sound in there when you get off at the bus station. There's a lot of little nice audio quirks that are built into the game.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, that took. It took a lot of player testing, UX sessions, beta tests. It took a lot of iterations to arrive at what is that right combination of, RPG flavor, giving folks those audio cues that, where it feels fun, it feels like you have agency. If you've played a tabletop RPG before, you kind of have that feeling, but isn't, overly complex. One of the things that we started out early with is, if you look at the Starfinder Beginner's Box, just at the base entry, there are 6 player stats, and even just trying to explain those through voice, you do 6 player stats times 5 available characters. It's not great for voice, because by the time you've gotten to the 5th character, people are trying to compare. Was this the character with the higher strength? Was this the character? So there was a lot to figure out, which kind of drove us to this essential experience, which we arrived at this after a lot of player testing, where immersion is key. You have to feel like you're there, and that is delivered through the high quality sound design. We have to make you feel as a player connected. You care what happens to your character, and we really found that the best way to do that is through the professional voice acting. Polly's not quite there yet. We had to give players agency. So you drive and develop your character. It's persistent. There are meaningful decisions that you're making throughout the course of the narrative, and then your experience is frustration free. It's simple, and the way that we arrive at that simplicity is just through a lot of play testing. So, yeah.
That's really interesting. Playtesting is, I mean, it's always key in games, but it seems even more important here when you are primarily looking at audio.
Yeah, I totally agree. And there's a couple of examples that I use in this as we get a little bit further, but just around, come in with a hypothesis, go do some play testing, and realize that, this particular mechanic is not fun. It's just not right. This is the kind of the summary of sort of the entire project, some of the high level features, and then the structure of it.
Okay, cool. So Urban Blaster's asking, does the skill have any ISP integrations?
So not yet. There will be, so basically the you can think of the model as episodic television. So we have this 30-minute plus or minus 30-minute free experience, and that was to help players kind of try before they buy. One of the things that we've found with skills in particular is just that players don't necessarily have a mental model yet for evaluating the content, aside from maybe brand association. And so we thought it was critical to get a demo into their hands so they could understand what they were getting into and help them make the purchase decision. So then there will be 6 premium episodes that'll release later this year. And so you'll be able to purchase both the season and individual episodes.
Oh, very cool. So this is almost like a tutorial then?
Yeah. So you can think of it as a tutorial, exposition to the world, getting the narrative, sort of exposing some of the narrative that'll carry through some of the episodes, as well as sort of setting a quality bar so that players kind of understand the context of what they're paying for.
I see. So Rush Z asks, you've tried Poly and found it not to have enough. Would you say that voice acting is necessary to make games at this level?
And Ezra, you could jump in whenever you want. I think it is. I think it's use case specific.
Okay.
There are, lots and lots of people. I think it's for me. It seems like it breaks along time of engagement, and then do you need connection?
Yeah.
Poly right now. Poly works really great if it's limited interactions or I'll never forget one of the Dopios, the Vortex. I thought they did just awesome at really leaning into, you're trapped in this, now all I can think of is hyperbaric chamber. It's not a hyperbaric chamber. You don't have the bends. But you're a cryostasis chamber. It's a sleep pod. And all your sort of avatars are robots, and they're all poly voices. Fantastic use case. It's really engaging. If you're doing something that's a little bit longer, where you're expecting players to keep coming back, so far, it seems like voice acting is very beneficial.
Hey,
And I want to add to that actually. This goes with the point of the whole playtesting thing. Like, there's no hard set rules that will just make your game or experience that much better just because you follow a formula. It's a lot about, engaging with the play testers and carefully constructing surveys and looking at their experiences with critical mind to say, okay, this works and this doesn't work, and making appropriate adjustments to that. And poly voices versus voiceover and sound effects, those are one of them.
Yeah.
Okay, very cool. And actually, it's interesting you bring up Doppio Games and the Vortex, because we're going to be speaking with Jefferson from Doppio Games later this week on Wednesday, 10 a.m. Pacific time. He definitely has some things to share. There were real thoughts, a lot of thought that went into that particular design decision.
Yeah. I will be just to give that a shout out. I will be tuning in and hanging on to every word, because those Chris Barnes and Jefferson, lots of game building experience, very deliberate about how they design player mechanics that are delightful. They're great folks to learn from.
Now, they're also on the note of beta testers. How do you encourage them to play and give feedback?
Yeah, absolutely. So this was, I played 3 years ago now. I participated in the Sea of Thieves alpha, I think it was. It was one of those things I saw online and applied for it, and I was able to participate fairly early, and it left a huge impression on me as to the value of an engaged community. That and the sort of co-creative process that happens when you have an engaged community. So for us, and for this project, being able to engage the existing fan base has been, it's been really important. Is one thing. Tactically, what we did is, for the pilot, when you complete the pilot, we give you a sort of a standard, upsell of, the more premium episodes will be coming. And then the first time, we ask you if you'd be interested in participating in a beta program. If players say yes, then we use the notifications API to request permissions. And so we'll use the technical documentation's out there somewhere, but basically we request the player's email address, and then we basically intake players that way. So that's just the tactics of it.
I like that as a selection mechanism. That's really nice.
Yeah, I mean, because it's really important to manage, opt-in. And so in this case, we have a double opt-in where they opt in the skill, and then we follow up with them to ensure, and then they opt in again into the beta, just to make sure that we're fully compliant.
All right, very cool. Yeah, there are some other good questions, but let's pull them in a little bit later.
Right.
Okay. Let's just jump right to the next slide.
All right.
So I'm going to talk about control scheme here. Very simply, control scheme is the system, or scheme by which players interact with the game. And so in this case, Alexa control schemes are really difficult, because you're managing what are probably not infinite, but a high number of possible inputs, and resolving to, so this is a skill flow builder, you're resolving to a discrete number of possible outcomes, and being able to manage the complexity of that is part of one of the harder lessons, that we had to sort of navigate. So are you able to sort of play that first, the skill check?
Yes.
You move cautiously down the corridor. Out of the corner of your eye, you notice that one of the large floor panels up ahead isn't quite right. Looking closer, you realize that it's actually been pried up, and some wires are poking out. Raya approaches cautiously to get a closer look.
Huh. Looks like these wires lead to an explosive of some kind hidden below the panel. Someone really doesn't want unexpected visitors.
The large floor panel spans the width of the corridor.
Yeah, we actually triggered that in our playthrough an hour ago.
Nice.
We didn't even
Nice.
get that prompt.
Yeah. So basically, narratively, we're presenting the player with a challenge, and then they have to decide how they're going to navigate the challenge. And then you can see, over on the left, so the left highlighted node, that's where we're, presenting the challenge. And then there's a series of branches depending on how you decide to navigate it. And so as far as control scheme goes, what we need to do is listen for, the player to say essentially one of two options. Are you going to disarm, or are you going to have, are you going to jump over it? Let's go quick, just quick chat. Who votes for disarming? Disarm or jump over? Otherwise, I'll just roll for it.
Yes, Rush Z, Starfinder was done using Skill Flow Builder. All right, we've got 1 vote for jump over, 2 votes for disarm. 3, 4, disarm.
All right. So it's going to be that top sound clip.
The bomb suddenly explodes, blasting you backward and tearing the floor around it to shrapnel that punches through your armor. You and Raya take 3 points of damage each.
You tricked us.
Okay, so you can go to the next slide. Just moving on. So basically, here are the trade-offs that we were making. Is you have a high number of possible inputs. This is actual. We players churn at 15% higher rate when they hit that. When Alexa doesn't handle their input. And so what you see under here is this is a code output from Skill Flow Builder. That's tuning the control scheme, is creating all of these intents, and in some cases, creating synonyms or custom slots to handle one particular branch in the story. So if you think about the sort of combinatorial explosion, the QA effort and the manual tuning very quickly gets completely out of hand. And so we were really struggling with that. Next slide.
So just to be clear here, these are the intents then, or are they the utterances?
These are the utterances.
I see. Okay.
Yeah, sorry. Yep. So then, this is sort of back in the summer or fall. I'm sort of working through, okay, where can I kind of look to other folks who have solved this problem before? Where can I kind of draw some inspiration? And for me, I actually approach game skills. The mental model for me is computer games from the 80s, especially kind of the early 80s, because we have to communicate, convince a player that entertainment on this device that a lot of folks think of as just kind of transactional, what's the weather like today, turn on a song, that it can also be used for entertainment. We have to teach them a new player scheme or a new control scheme. We have to teach them how to interact with the game. And then we have to teach them about the world itself. So there's compounding challenges, which in the 80s was exactly what text-based adventures, what parser games were trying to figure out. And so we were able to talk to Brian Moriarty, he was a designer for Infocom, and specifically he worked on Wishbringer. And this was kind of the advice that he gave us, how they approached it. And the main thing was the goal was to minimize frustration and improve the illusion of agency. And so, right. So, which makes sense. And if you go to the next slide, we have kind of a pretty good example. So on the left, you've got, this is the introductory scene from Wishbringer, which would have played out on a, MS-DOS prompt. And so you have sort of at the top, this hilltop, that's where you are.
Call me pessimistic.
There's a description of the environment and an exposition of what the player can do, and then the prompt itself. Okay, what do you want to do now?
Call me pessimistic.
And what we
but
found is,
sorry.
sort of, as we were driving towards this, you can build it.
Call me pessimistic,
Is
but
that
I doubt that's the
Our
sound of helpful
structure
workers making
started to
repairs.
look like this, so you can go ahead and play it.
You continue, and the passage widens slightly, exposing a steel door to your right marked Diagnostics. It hangs slightly ajar, and you can hear muffled whimpers coming from behind it. The sound of clanking and scraping is louder now, but clearly coming from still further down the passage.
Do you investigate the diagnostics room? Or continue down the passage towards the clanking?
So you offer them a very specific prompt with specific words.
Right. So that's, one of the ways that we handle it is by offering two discrete options. And this, I absolutely love this example. So along those same lines, we talked about it a little bit earlier, but there are between 50 and 60 different data points per RPG character, and that's even out of kind of the simplified characters. There's a lot of different choices. Character creation in a tabletop RPG will typically take, you run it over a 2 or a 3 hour session, and there's an experienced player there helping, and we needed to do that in about 30 seconds.
Yep.
And so we came up with this idea of a personality quiz. The first question of which, you can go ahead and play it.
Imagine the
but
type
the first
of
question
spacefaring
is,
adventure
are you a
you'd like to
leader,
play while
loner,
answering
or
the
fiercely
following
loyal
questions.
friend?
At your core, are you a leader?
This skill
Loner?
goes to, heads out
fiercely
into
loyal
production. That's the first question. And, we tested this so many times, and we get the number one unhandled response is this: all of the above. So I don't know if we missed the narcissistic audience when we were beta testing, but and it was, people were hitting, they were hitting the fallback response. They were, getting frustrated. And so if you go to the next slide, we had a couple of options on how we wanted to handle that. So there's the, pretend you handle it, which in this case, there were 3 questions, 3 different personality questions. And so we could pull the player forward. So if you build this, so, they say all of the above, we're like, okay, great.
Here's
your ISIF. Fantastic. No problem.
Mm-hmm.
And then, or we can do the reprompt. So, are you a leader, loner, fiercely loyal friend, all of the above? Reiterate the discrete choices. And one of the things that we found with the reprompt is it balances the some of the more open-ended RPG aesthetic with the realities of a somewhat limited control scheme. We're looking for 2 to 3 inputs from the player, and so there are times when we need to, if the player input is not as expected, that we can narrow them down with a reprompt, and that's very helpful. Which actually gets us to this next point, which is, okay, how agency versus volition versus input. So we have on the one hand, we've taught the players a control scheme that's somewhat divergent, but resolves to 2 to 3 different paths or choices. And the goal of the game is for high autonomy players to enjoy it. So how do we balance those two?
Mm-hmm.
And actually, that's what Ezra's going to talk about.
All right.
Yeah. So before moving on, I think we could address some questions if you think we have time for that.
Yeah, so there's a good question here from M. Tucker saying, with all intents being global and always active, wouldn't it be a great feature to be able to turn on or off intents to limit input possibilities in this case?
Yeah, it seems like ZRush actually kind of answered that question. Skill Flow Builder does handle that. So in Skill Flow Builder, there's a concept of scene. In a scene, you basically register or put a command for what utterances or group of intents you're listening for, and that's what it handles. And REST basically is handled automatically as I didn't unhandled, and it does a repeat. Or if there's a global level command that you've kind of hammered out, then it executes that instead. So
okay.
yeah, I mean, in that sense, Skill Flow Builder has been very helpful because you don't have to worry about state management of all types of intents that you've included in your
okay,
skill.
that's really awesome.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. I think let's go on.
Yeah. Okay. So.
Uh-oh. Ezra?
It's coming back any minute, I believe.
Oh no, Ezra froze right when he was going to speak.
The internet cannot, the bandwidth cannot just can't handle the amount of knowledge that's about to come.
Well, would you be able to speak to these points, Chris?
Of course. Yeah, I can happily do that. So I'll cover just catching up a little bit. So we know the user experience is king. If you want to, which basically we spent much more time in design and in design iterations than we did in engineering. And I'll,
Oh no, Chris. They can't hear you. Oh, that's very odd. Let's see here. Oh, I see. Let's try this. All right. Try speaking now, Chris.
Test. 1 2 1 2.
Okay, we're back. Sorry about that. User experience is key. Yes, Octobox, it is a bit ironic that we provided you a bad user experience here. I'm very sorry about that.
I think we can go ahead and let's go to next slide.
All right.
We've just
Yeah, we lost Ezra.
I know.
Sorry about that, chat. I pinged him. I hope he'll be back soon.
Okay, good. All right. Yeah, because I mean, you don't want to listen to me go through all this thing. So, yeah, let's go to the sky is not the limit.
Oh, right.
Yes. So, this speaks to a very originally, we tried a whole bunch of different ways to deliver the user experience that we discussed, sort of in the introduction. And what we found is that we ran into a lot of hurdles. So I talked to the kind of the content combinatorial explosion, where the number of branches and choices that we can handle, given our available sort of QA and other resources, is actually pretty small, and users shy of we did deliberately choose to create an experience that does not require pencil and paper. There he is. I was doing my best.
Okay, this is the beauty of live streaming and broadcasting, I suppose. My computer just decided to crash right as I was.
Excellent.
Luck I have.
Excellent.
But yeah, I don't know. So we're already at Sky is not the limit.
How about that?
I'll take that. So
with video conferencing and our presentation.
This is the COVID rite of passage. But anyways, so yeah, Sky's the limit part. Probably Chris already talked about it. I was very excited. I was avid RPG player, TTRPG, and computer gaming and all that. And there were a lot of things that we wanted to achieve, and the result is that we brainstormed everything. So the sky's the limit, no technical limitation. Let's try to think of everything that we want to do, that we enjoy, and we would like to see, and list them out. And it turns out, as we go through the playtesting and stuff like that, things were not as they seemed. It's really difficult to achieve what we really wanted to achieve. So we're taking a lot of the information from the text adventures of having those open prompts of what do you do, and handle everything we can, or anything similar to the utterances, predict what people are about to say, and then branch accordingly and stuff like that. But you can probably imagine all the combinatorics explosion of choices and contents you have to start generating. Things are not as natural, not as good as like really cured and pre-written stories in terms of like player satisfaction of, okay, as a player, I want to progress through the narratives in this way. That is not actually very satisfying, even though it's full agency. And there's a really relevant talk in game design in general by Scott Rigby and GDC as well, called the freedom fallacy. And it talks about how agency, like these open world gameplay, is not necessarily giving players the volition, the feeling of need being satisfied. So it's not about just having a lot of choices. It boils down to providing set number of choices that matter to the player. So before doing that, you have to make sure to construct and generate what do the things that players should care about throughout the narratives. Do they care about their character's growth, personality, or the story progression, or they want to be powerful? Those things. So that's what we had to do. So sky's not the limit. We have the content issue. So what did we do? So we had to make great sacrifices. It's a great sacrifice to me personally, because the Starfinder team, when they were deciding on the gameplay and all those things, some of these awesome open world things and like freedom things were something that I wanted to see. And as a avid D&D player and just tabletop RPG in general, it was somewhat painful to kind of see those things go and say, oh, okay, maybe it's not time to explore into that world yet. But, at the end of the day, we had to do what we had to do. And so the Starfinder team ended up cutting the expositions. A lot of the expositions had to trim down, had to cut a lot of the open prompts. We did keep some select choices that worked and some of the branches that worked, because still, at heart, we wanted that experience as much as we can. And we had to reduce the complex interactive systems and all that stuff. So next slides, we're going to talk about some of the things there. Let's see.
Simplifying narrative?
Oh, no. Yeah, so that's one of the examples. So at first you could see when branching a story, you could imagine making a selection, and then that changes the ending by this much, and then that has its own branch, and that has its own branch, and what you end up getting is a number of content that is not really manageable or writable or reasonably serve and test. That's actually a really important point, because one could want to desire to provide all these great narrative structures and different endings and combinations of things that could happen. But problem is, without being able to fully test all those things, you can never guarantee if the story is truly satisfying in every manner. And sometimes you could say, okay, 90 or 80% of the time it is satisfying, so we can go with that, and 20% it is not. Sometimes you got to say that is not worth having those things. You want 100% of the time great experience.
Yeah.
And so after trimming, the narrative structure started to resemble this diamond shape, where you have a choke point and then you branch off, you have some unique interaction, and then come back, so that you have some sort of this railed experience, but at the same time have a choice variation, experience variation. People may feel that is a little bit too restricting and would like something more branching and varying. Of course, it takes a lot of work, and it's something worth doing. It's just not for Starfinder. And good thing about this is that the diamond structure and the choked branch content schema is already well-known structure within the interactive fiction writers community and creator community. So, use what we already know. People have been studying this field for a long time, so we just adapted what we could from that. Yeah. All right. So yeah.
Is this an example?
Yeah.
Then.
Well, this is example of an expansion. So each slide right now is just talking about all the great sacrifices we had to make and what it ended up looking like and kind of justification of doing those things. So some of the exposition cuts, right? So when you're a dungeon master in general or game master for these tabletop RPGs, you tend to get into this explanation of like this beautiful world, the structure, you see a corridor, you see a shadow, you see the tree, all those things. And it's very satisfying to tell these stories, and as a player, it's great to listen to. However, the transactional nature of the Alexa experience kind of prevents that from being immersive. It actually takes you out, because what you end up doing is you're listening for a long time and you can't skip or ask interrupting questions to pay attention to the things that you want to hear about. It's easy as a game master to see what the player's reaction is and immediately change the kind of narrative structure or the exposition you have, but it's really difficult to have just one set of most detailed exposition and expect everybody to just enjoy that experience. And so, and also it serves as a red herring, which is not good. So when you explain some things in this precise and the succinct experience of audio interactive fiction, when you provide information, it can seem confusing because people would think, oh, this is an information I need to take note of in order to apply later. And if it doesn't pay off, and this is a lot of the game design stuff, if you give players something, let's say relationship, narrative, or something, and it doesn't pay off, it doesn't feel good at all, especially if that person wanted that payoff. So it's a lot of the intentional exposition, and also there was a lot of sound engineering and sound effect work to kind of briefly explain what the situation is. So like you were talking about it earlier about how when you go to the bus station or get off the little train and in town, you hear the background noises and stuff like that. With one word from the narrator along with the sound effect, that did a lot of the exposition for you without having to explain everything for you. There were a lot of people, it's busy street, people are walking through, you're walking through this busy street. That's really crux of the voice design and the sound design that was happening in Starfinder, to make sure even with the long exposition, long description, you still pack in as much information as possible without leading the players astray from the point. So that's one of the learnings we have from exposition. Next. Okay, so this is what we call a choice cocktail. So I talked about earlier about making sure the decisions are providing a payoff to the players and making sure that the limited decisions are the decisions that fully satisfy the player's need. And that's where we came with the choice cocktail. In general, there's a strategic choices, and then there's a tactical choices, and then there is a emotive choices. And these actually represent a short-term payoff, long-term payoff, and medium payoff in a sense. So strategic choices are something like a narrative decision. You make a choice to do something, and then it shows off as a result in the narration, like the overarching story. So it's a long-term, medium-term payoff because it's a medium-term in terms of the narrative episode. And then you have the tactical decision of the combat where you get the payoff immediately. You make a choice and the result of that is reflected immediately. You see what happens, and then you get to feel the satisfaction of making that choices that had a high impact on the result of the right now. Emotive choices are something where you're building your character. You're trying to describe what kind of character you're playing, what kind of character you are, relational things or alignment-related things, because that is permanent to your character. You're playing through, regardless of what the narrative is, the character is the one consistent point. And so building that character's personality is a very long-term payoff. And of course, you do want to pay that off because that's the most committed part of it. And there are a lot of examples I'm not going to mention names of other game examples where there was a promise of payoff, this long-term emotive payoff, but it didn't happen, and there was a huge flashback of doing that. So that's something you can learn. Yeah, I don't know if I can say it, but yes.
Probably
Joe,
we'll
absolutely.
let people discover games that do that on their own.
I'm sure there are other examples. And I'm not saying those things were actually bad games or anything. It's just when you're focusing on three of these things and different people like different part of this more. And if you're a designer, you tend to be biased towards one thing or another. And from your experience, so that it's natural for you to kind of forget about these other payoffs, especially if you have multiple people working on the game. But anyways, we're calling this a choice cocktail because a right amount of mixture of these things provide a delicious cocktail that is just so good to consume, so addicting and so delicious to consume. And that we were trying to achieve, what the Starfinder team was trying to achieve with these choice cocktail. So yeah.
So you hit on this a moment ago with core versus casual players. How do you see that?
Yeah, no, I mean, I think there was a doubt in the beginning of the design process of like, okay, these simplified structure of the choices and narrative structure, will that hurt, the favor from the core players who are used to these full-on freedom tabletop RPG experience? Surprisingly, this goes back to the volition of providing the choices that the need is satisfied. As long as there's a choice that correlates to one of the I want to do this mindset, I think this is my personal opinion now. There are proofs in the kind of reviews and the feedbacks as well. But for now, as long as you can provide significantly different resulting choices where it is a good, careful choices that resonate with one's mindset of how to lead the story, it was good. And also you can see in the comment, as you can see in the slide, a lot of 5-star reviews from the core and casual players saying that this is a great experience. This is great for introducing other people. I'm excited to show it to my children and friends and all those things. So yeah, I think overall we've struck something good. I do want to have a concluding remark about this.
Yeah.
This doesn't mean this is the end of it. This is what you should do. Always cut everything. No, that's not the case. It's just given the time we had, given the time the Starfinder team had, and given the information that are here now and the experiment you could perform, this is a result that the Starfinder arrived at. There is still room for improvement in terms of like adding freeform answers and questions. It's something that has no answers to. We can't say outright it's impossible, don't do it, it's a terrible experience, because who knows, right? So this is where I rely on the developer community and the future of the platform community and developers to say, okay, no more tech demos. I mean, tech demos are great, but start thinking about the experience. Experience is the king, because at the end of the day, you're satisfying your users. You're not trying to satisfy other developers or impress other developers, right? You're trying to impress and satisfy your customers. And so it's something I want to say.
That's just great advice for any kind of software.
Yeah.
So I would actually, so we've got about 5-6 minutes. I would be in favor of, we could just maybe pause or skip this section and maybe go to some questions here.
Yeah. So we've got definitely some from the chat here. Justin points out there's good Sonic branding. We have, let's see. And any questions, please feel free to post them now. Rush Z says, it seems difficult to think about what would be the game changer game for Alexa, meaning explosion user growth and dev interest once they see it, and what that one game could do. So what do you think are the best ways to leverage the medium to be something truly different and special? Maybe it's Starfinder as it grows. Your approach choice makes a ton of sense. It's economical, almost where it can map to levels of decision fatigue. There's a lot there.
Yeah, it's nice small question.
Yeah, just throwing you an easy one.
No, I can address a little bit about the decision fatigue, if that's okay with you, Chris. Yeah. So no, I think it's true. It's very possible, but I think the beauty here is that the structure of Starfinder lends itself to the kind of audio drama, so to speak, a little bit. So there are actually a lot of non-intense and heavy interactive section where people can actually be passive enough, and then the actually we didn't get to talk about this, but the sound design of going from the listening mode to answering question mode, the AI voice switches with the background sound effect and then the dimming of the background sounds and switching that was worked on to clearly indicate, okay, you can relax, you can answer now, to just kind of give that feeling of less anxiety while listening at least, so that you're in a listening mode, so you don't have to be nervous about this, making choices and stuff like that. And actually, the whole thing about not saying what do you do, but saying do you do this or that based on some sort of business logic in the back or the narrative structure that actually allow people to kind of make the decision in a very quick and easy manner. And I think that's enough said.
Yeah. So we have a comment here. What's the next future of smart dice pairs with IoT?
Ooh.
Have you given any thought about making an Alexa gadget or something like?
We have not, but there are plenty of people out there, and it's not. So someone was saying, I think that maybe this first part of that question was around, what could be that type of breakout game, and I'll say that this is my personal opinion, but I think that there is pairing with the idea of smart dice. I think that there is room to grow these sort of distributed experiences, and I think that it's that part of what Starfinder has uncovered is this appetite for the RPG type experience where there isn't necessarily the access. And so I think expanding that from, single player into multiplayer, experimenting with what that looks like. What does Starfinder look like? And I'm not saying that, that we're looking at this, but what does Starfinder look like if it's a party of 4? What could that look like? What does it look like as a transmedia, thinking about this type of experience, but it's part of a broader narrative arc that's being told as part of a television series or series of movies. Because I think and this kind of goes towards somebody was asking about what are we planning marketing wise?
Yeah, that's another question.
So I think that because thinking about computers in the 80s, discovery was very, very difficult. That computer was always off. Somebody, a consumer had to make a deliberate, get awareness that the device could be used for entertainment, become aware of entertainment options on it, and then go, make the purchase. And that's kind of what I see here is that when you're able to tie into existing marketing, then I think there's a really good opportunity there. But I think it has to be an authentic experience as opposed to
tacked on,
just like it.
Yeah, right.
I think that shows. I think I think players are savvy enough to be able to distinguish between what is a marketing stunt and what is a storytelling experience.
Yeah, it's definitely clear to me that you're all tabletop RPG lovers. You and everyone from Paizo when it comes to this game.
Yeah, I'd say so.
We have a really good question here from G Shinar 1. Are you able to add any skill-based mechanics to this sort of story-based decision experience?
Yes, so they're in there now. So all 10 of the character skills are used in some. Not all of them are used in the pilot, but they're all used through the course of the stories. So you do as part of that the bomb in the corridor scenario that we talked about earlier. There's a technology check. There's a perception check. There is right. And so depending on if you've told Alexa to roll for you or not, is how much detail she'll go into as to, if the checks are happening, and that is a key mechanic that we use to distinguish the core versus casual player, because the casual player, doesn't really care which skill check is being used. The core player absolutely does, and regularly gives us feedback if they don't think it's an accurate depiction.
My DM in our D&D game lets us do multiple different skill checks. Why don't you let us do multiple different skill checks?
I would defer to Amanda Hammond, the managing developer of the Starfinder franchise.
Also, hearing that kind of makes the developer in me cry a little. Just thinking about all the different handlings I have to manage.
So are there any JavaScript libraries you installed that made the development process much easier or uniform? This sounds like a question for you, Ezra.
Yeah, so the skill is developed in Node.js, just like most of the Alexa skills in general, and it uses the library, the SFB one. In terms of additional things that help specifically for this, rather than just like generic development, there wasn't any additional things that we had to get. We were actually able to do most of the things that we wanted with the just vanilla Node.js along with SFB. Yeah.
Yeah, I've definitely set out to make a game with just vanilla Node.js for Alexa, and it's tough without being able to have some good state management.
Yeah, I mean that's a big part. So SFB providing the state management and then the state variable management, a lot of resource management, and another thing is the extension. I mean, I do use a lot of FS and Path to load and save configurations. Well, load mostly, because a lot of the design components like enemy status or stats or combat structure, like the battle map, and some of the recommendation during the combat and priorities, those are written in JSON and you have to load it. And luckily SFB allows, I say luckily as if I didn't make SFB,
He did
but so we made it so that the SFB allows those resource loading somewhat fairly easy if you know it. So that I use a lot of those. It's
sounds like a good topic for the deep dive to go a little bit more into.
Yeah.
I wanted to, can I grab Rush's
Yes.
question real quick?
It's a good question.
So which is just about, do you know of any easy ways to look unattractive unintentionally when doing story-based Alexa skills? So we learned this after deploying to production with that introduction. So, as I think that previous slide kind of broke it down, but our first introduction to the game was on average, it was about 15 minutes, took about 15 minutes, and you saw kind of the breakdown of lore and all that. And it was not performing the way that we wanted it to perform. It was driving this really high churn. And so just to that point, what we, sort of as we looked at it, it was we were opening the skill. The first thing you encountered in the skill was polyvoices, and they were abstract of this storytelling environment. We didn't get you into kind of an action sequence very quickly. And then, so essentially, we were looking unintentionally unattractive by not showing the sort of high points of the skill. The best things about the skill are the action, your agency, and then the rich sound environment. And so in the shift that we made, the update that we pushed, we pulled all of that forward. So we got rid of the abstract personality quiz, and we brought in a scenario-based personality quiz that's all voice acted, rich sound effects, etc. We cut the time that you feel like you're in, story mode, or I'm sorry, like training mode, the introduction mode, and we get you right to exploring. So just in terms of, some easy things that occur to me, it's hiding the value. So, make sure, give the value to the players within the first 30 seconds to a minute. Show off your skills highlights, and then help the players grok the experience. Like we had to, or we started training the player in how to interact with the game, right from the beginning. And there were some things that we handle, kind of administratively outside the game, and some things that we train the player on just by their pattern of interaction. Like we talk about right when you come into the game, we talk about, we'll save your progress. You can leave whenever you want. And that's to, lower the anxiety of players have anxiety about, this is a narrative-based game. How long am I going to have to sit here? So we wanted to deliberately address that.
I also like that you have a very specific audio sound that is played when you're saving the game too. So kind of, gives another cue that that's happening.
Yeah, and we didn't talk about it as much, but the audio design is critical to the experience of the game. Essentially, we were able to get rid of a lot of the audio, or the sort of narrator telling, by creating, whether it was a sound cue, a soundscape, an element of sound that tells the player, gives the player some type of contextual hint. And we found that is just as effective at storytelling as, the narrator going through and explaining something.
Okay. So we're a little over time already, but we still have a few more questions. So we'll go for another 5 minutes. So get your questions in now. Urban Blaster asks, how many devs were responsible for building this experience?
So for Pilot specifically, since that's the release version.
Yeah.
Chris?
I'll just say it's a small team.
Okay.
It's a two pizza team.
So two pizza team is you can feed the team with 2 pizzas.
With 2 pizzas.
All right. So we have here another question from M. Tucker PHX. Can you have Skillflow Builder access a headless CMS?
Uh-oh.
Oh,
you're
muted, Ezra.
Sorry, headless CMS. I might need some explanation on that.
Yeah. Can you elaborate a bit on that question? Exactly what you mean by headless CMS. I guess a CMS that's geared towards voice experiences.
I'm looking at Sanity.
I mean, so there's nothing specifically preventing it.
And with an extension, you should be able to make that happen, correct?
Yeah. So, I mean, one example. Okay, hold on. There's a headless CMS can be used for things like character scenes, etc., instead of JSON.
So instead of
files.
using FS, you would use, API.
Oh, yeah. So that, I mean, SFE doesn't enable or prevent you, meaning it doesn't like specifically give you ways to access those things. Like there's no interface to access those things specifically, but it doesn't prevent you, meaning it can give you where the resource paths are, and then you can do whatever you want with that resource in the middle of the cycle of the execution. So yeah, you can. Yeah.
Very cool. Let's see here. We have another one. Man, that's so different from how PC and console story RPGs start. In reference to the talking about how you start up the game. This consistent sound cues and saving assurance makes so much sense. I didn't think about that when planning. Appreciate the information. Thank you, Rush Z. And Justin wants to know if it's a personal pan pizza. So the different roles on the team, you mentioned a bit. There are, product manager, there's QA, there's some development, and design as well.
Yep. And design. Yeah. And then, I will say, and he wasn't, able to be here today, but having some folks on the sound design, having a sound engineer, be able to devote some time to this was also very, very helpful in terms of engineering the output to maximize for, the Alexa
constraints.
the SSML playback requirements.
I see.
One thing I do want to add on top of the roles comment is that, yeah, you do have these different roles for like focus, but in terms of game design and just overall vision of the product itself, I noticed a lot of the different roles had to kind of like cross-pollinate in terms of no siloed development experiences.
Yeah.
I think this is true for any game studio in general. That is the best way to develop a convincing game, I think.
Yeah, especially like on the more the smaller side. Everyone kind of has their hands in everything, and it's important for a holistic view. All right. Well, thank you all for joining. Thank you, Chris and Ezra, for presenting this awesome content.
Thank you for having
us.
us.
Had a blast with
Yeah,
that.
thank you.
I hope the chat had fun as well and learned some things. Yeah, feel free to check out the full list of times here. Oh, that's the wrong one. That's for the web API.
Nice.
You can check out the web API too. You can check out the Starfinder game here, or the whole list of other talks we're going to have this week for Alexa Games Week with that last blog post that I posted correctly this time. So tune in more to see more games and talk a little bit more about Starfinder, both in the context of Skill Flow Builder, and we'll talk to a voice expert designer in the game space as well about Starfinder. So,
Awesome.
thanks for coming, everyone.
Thanks, everyone.
Bye.
Bye-bye.